Hi, BookTube. Welcome to another fiction review. I don't have a lot of preamble today. The book we are going to look at has been in print for over 50 years, and I know there has been a lot of talk on BookTube about what makes a classic a classic. I've already heard this title mentioned more than once, and I'm so pleased because, in my opinion, it definitely should be a classic. The book we are reviewing today is The Bluest Eye by Toni Morrison. Originally published in 1970, I read the Kindle version, which came out in 2022, and you'll see the ISBN details on screen. So, question 1. Can I pitch this novel? This novel is a secret being shared. As the reader, you become the confidant of Claudia McTeer and her sister Frida, two girls growing up in Lorain, Ohio, on the shores of Lake Erie in 1941. That's 20 years before the Civil Rights Movement, 20 years before the Black is Beautiful movement. At that time, there is nothing except a strong sense of self-worth which could protect any Black child from the constant social reminders that only whiteness is beautiful, only whiteness really matters. Now for questions 2 and 3, all the straightforward stuff about how I obtained the book, how long the book is. Well, of course, I read the Kindle edition, as I mentioned before, which is 215 pages. The novel itself is 200 pages, but then you have an afterword written by the author, which is definitely worth reading as well. Now, I bought my copy around the time I started this BookTube channel. I was checking out a lot of other channels, trying to get a feel for what was already out there, and trying to decide what I would or would not do. And I can't remember the video where the presenter said that in their opinion, The Bluest Eye was the most important Toni Morrison novel. I had only read Beloved, and I thought, I say only. I'm pulling back like that because Beloved had such a powerful effect on me. I was trying to imagine a more powerful book than that. I used to keep a record of all the books that I read using an Excel spreadsheet. I did that for about 10 years. And recently I reviewed it. And you know what shocked me? Was the number of books I couldn't remember at all. I saw the title written there and the author, but I couldn't even remember what the cover looked like, couldn't remember anything about the story. I mean, what does that say? It has to say something surely about the books that are memorable. There are books where just me reading the title would evoke several of the characters and some of the most emotionally charged scenes, and the shock that you experience when you realize, my God, I'm reading a really amazing book. Now, Beloved was one of those books. So, of course, I had to read The Bluest Eye. I paid £3.99 for the Kindle version. I think that's just over $5 US. Let's talk about the author. Toni Morrison was born in Lorain, Ohio, the setting for The Bluest Eye, in 1931. Her parents came from sharecropping families who had moved north in the early part of the 20th century. Morrison spoke at the Hay Festival of Literature in 2014, and she talked about how storytelling was part of family life, that she was expected as a child to be able to retell the stories told to her. With that inclination towards stories, Morrison graduated from Howard University in 1953 with a bachelor's degree in English, and she followed that with a master's degree from Cornell University in 1955. Now, while she was teaching at Howard University, Morrison joined a group of poets and writers and began to produce her own fiction tentatively, the material that would be expanded and crafted to become The Bluest Eye. In 1963, she changed career and became an editor at Random House. In 1970, The Bluest Eye was published. Now, Morrison continued to hold down her publishing job while also producing additional novels until 1983. Her most acclaimed work, Beloved, was published in 1987, and it won the Pulitzer Prize a year later. Morrison won the Nobel Prize for Literature in 1993 and the Presidential Medal of Freedom in 2012. In addition to her 10 novels, Morrison has also written numerous essays, articles, non-fiction, and children's books. She has more honorary degrees than most of her online biographies really wanted to list. They would give you about the first 10 or 11, and then they'd just say, among others. Right? She was 88 years old when she died in 2019. Let's talk about the setting in The Bluest Eye. Toni Morrison describes the place she grew up. I will quote, but I'll also leave a link in my description box in case you would like to watch the full interview. About Lorain, Ohio, Morrison says, they never had the laws that they had in other parts of the country, but what they did have were understandings, and I became aware of them when my mother and her brothers were very interested when new places opened up in the town. New theater. My mother was on her way to the theater the day it opened, and she would go in Saturday morning, the first day, just to see where the ushers were directing black people. They would never have a sign, but they might take their little flashlight because they'd been told, put them all over here, and she would always deliberately go someplace else, just to make sure they weren't going to impose any de facto segregation on us. Same thing for swimming pools. I remember my uncle going into Isley's ice cream store, where they had a counter and booth, and we all knew we could go and get ice cream if we could get the cream and leave, but we thought that maybe we couldn't sit down. So he goes in and orders and sits down in a booth, and there's a little altercation there. But there was this concerted effort to make sure whenever there was a new business in town, and there were places where we were not welcome, like Lake Erie, the city park. Morrison, in the sharing secrets technique of her novel, she gives away all the unmentioned subtle acts of racism in Lorain, which is a seemingly unsegregated city. Claudia describes her school experience, where the white boys throw stones and the white girls suck their teeth. You can hear that sound, can't you? That's quoting from page 57 of the Kindle version, and I'll be quoting Kindle page numbers here. If that's the sound they make if they're asked to be Claudia's work partner. The local store owner can look at Claudia's friend with, quote, total absence of human recognition, the glazed separateness. That's from page 46. Regarding the narrative viewpoint and the narrative voice, Claudia McTeer is our guide. She is not a child at the time of narration, although she's describing her childhood. She's an adult. She's sorting through her memories, things she's later realized. And perhaps she has gone to a life beyond the physical, a transcendent life that has now given her greater insight. That would explain the secret that she knows about other people and their past. And it would also explain her detachment, which I would not call misleading, but more protective. The secrets she plans to tell are painful, and so her tone and her way of holding back the worst for a while feels like a mercy, because she knows how difficult the events she reveals are going to be. She says on page 3, quote, since why is difficult to handle, one must take refuge in how. Claudia demonstrates the strength of her own self-regard that she had when she was younger, and it's strength that partly issues from her family, where, she says on page 10, quote, love thick and dark as Alaga syrup. But there's partly something in her temperament, too, which pushes back against the subtle pressure, as in this passage, which I'm going to read about Claudia's unrequested Christmas present from page 18. It had begun with Christmas and the gift of dolls. The big, the special, the loving gift was always a big, blue-eyed baby doll. From the clucking sounds of adults, I knew that the doll represented what they thought was my fondest wish. I had only one desire, to dismember it, to see of what it was made, to discover the dearness, to find the beauty, the desirability that had escaped me, but apparently only me. Adults, older girls, shops, magazines, newspapers, window signs. All the world had agreed that a blue-eyed, yellow-haired, pink-skinned doll was what every girl treasured. Here, they said, this is beautiful, and if you are on this day worthy, you may have it. I fingered the face, wondering at the single-stroke eyebrows, picked at the pearly teeth stuck like two piano keys between red, bowline lips, traced the turned-up nose, poked the glassy blue eyeballs, twisted the yellow hair. I could not love it, but I could examine it to see what it was that all the world said was lovable. Break off the tiny fingers, bend the flat feet, loosen the hair, twist the head around, and the thing made one sound. A sound they said was the sweet and plaintive cry, Mama, but which sounded to me like the bleat of a dying lamb, or more precisely our icebox door opening on rusty hinges in July. Remove the cold and stupid eyeball, and it would bleat still. Ah! Take off the head, shake out the sawdust, crack the back against the brass bed rail, and it would bleat still. The gauze back would split, and I could see the disc with 6 holes, the secret of the sound, a mere metal roundness. Does the novel fit a genre label? I've heard The Bluest Eye referred to as a coming-of-age novel. I'm not sure I agree. if only because I cannot identify which character comes of age. Many characters get older, including Claudia McTeer, but Claudia's thoughts about her Christmas baby doll that I quoted, they're a good indication that she always had something more grown up about her. Pekala Breedlove's story, on the other hand, it's not a coming of age, but a tragedy. And that's what I would call The Bluest Eye, a tragedy. Not in the Shakespearean sense. If you were subjected to Shakespeare in school, you will remember the concept of the tragic flaw. It's an inherent problem within the hero, and it's what ultimately causes him or her to destroy themselves. Now, Pekala Breedlove, she doesn't have a natural flaw, nor do her parents, and nor do their parents. But the power of this suggestion, which tells them that they're flawed because they are not white, which is heard over and over and over, it works the same kind of damage as if there actually had been something naturally flawed. Is there anything readers should bear in mind when deciding whether to read this novel? There will be pain. Now, Toni Morrison has an ability, which I noticed when I read Beloved. I can't say exactly how she achieves this. I must analyze it. But it's how masterful she is with her choice and arrangement of language and narration. She can lead you, and you come willingly, and even at the moment of pain, which in this book and in Beloved I have felt physically. That's how powerfully she describes it. Nevertheless, I wanted to be where I was. I wanted to know. She truly turns pain into art. I can't describe it any other way. So you marvel at the transformation, how you can be reading something that you would normally be unable to read, and especially me, because you know I've admitted to being a complete coward. Is there problematic content in the book? Yes, there is a lot, okay? There are several accounts of child abuse, psychological, physical, and sexual, as well as animal cruelty. What is the context and purpose of the problematic content? Probably the more important question. It may seem crazy to suggest that all this content is needed, is important. I think it would have been a disservice to the past if the content had been diluted or reduced. In this case, it might have qualified as a form of denial. And about The Bluest Eye, Toni Morrison herself said, and I'm quoting her now, "I felt compelled at that time," this is mid-60s, "most of what was being published by black men were very powerful, aggressive, revolutionary fiction or nonfiction. And also they had a very positive, racially uplifting rhetoric to go with it, some of which I, as an older person, thought, wait a minute, black is beautiful, yeah, but why so loud? They're going to skip over something and no one's going to remember that it wasn't always beautiful, you know." So when I wrote The Bluest Eye, it was about that. Before we all decide that we're all beautiful, let me speak for some of us who didn't get that right away. You've got the most vulnerable people in the world, which are children, female black children, which have never held center stage in anything, the least important. I wanted to have a little hurt black girl center stage in my story. If you want to hear the rest of Toni Morrison's thoughts on that subject, I will leave a link to the YouTube video that I just quoted. Okay, we're at the closing stages now. Any suggestions for related or follow-up reading? Well, if you have not read Beloved, you must. Okay, you know that I'm rarely demanding or dictatorial on this channel, but I feel that The Bluest Eye and Beloved will still be known and respected by readers when both those books reach their 100th birthdays. The Bluest Eye at 50 years old still has not aged. I want to also say thank you, everybody, now that the review is over, because I gained 3 new subscribers this week. So whoever you are, I just wanted you to know that you provided me with a little boost, which was great. What's coming up now? Let's see. I've started reading an unusual book by a Booker shortlisted author, which takes the concept of historical fiction and makes it very personal. And also, I'm reading a book based on a BBC series, which has been called Mind Expanding and essential for anyone who wants to deepen or change their life. Thanks very much for viewing this video. I look forward to seeing everybody again soon. Take care. Bye-bye.